Welcome to Construction Genius. This is Eric Anderton. My guest today is Felipe, Engineer-Manriquez. He is the Director of Project Delivery Services at the Bolt Company. He's also the CEO and host of the EBFC podcast, and he is also a published author. Nice thing about Felipe is that he is an optimist, but he's also a realist, and he is deeply experienced in the world of construction and the benefits of approaching construction with an innovative, optimistic mindset to help increase the productivity, safety, and quality of the projects that you are working on. In our discussion today, we take a look at 2023 and talk about the labor shortage, supply chain issues, and generational differences, all in view of how these things can be mitigated for and processed in your business so that you can continue to build your projects profitably. There are tons of nuggets in our conversation today that you'll be able to use and apply immediately. From the landmine of the hybrid workspace to how to implement offsite construction effectively with limitations to offsite construction that you need to take into account. We talk about how to proactively manage your schedule so that everyone is on the same page and everyone understands what needs to be done to execute projects profitably. So there's tons of great stuff here for you today. As I always say, enjoy my conversation with Felipe. Check out all the links in the show notes to his various resources. Well worth you exploring those. And thank you for listening to Construction Genius here today. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Felipe, welcome back to Construction Genius.
Thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure to be back on.
It's interesting. I like to bring guests back on who have something useful to share with my audience. I want to give you the floor here because you're involved in the business. Tell us your perspective on the current state of construction.
Yeah, thank you so much. Right now, we're coming out of the pandemic. It's late 2022. And today in construction, we have a massive labor shortage. One of the biggest issues that we're facing now is that we do not have enough people to do the projects. And there are lots of companies. I'm hearing lots of examples across the industry from my peers talking about jobs that they have to pass on because they don't have the capability or capacity, more so the capacity to take on the work. I heard a statistic early in the fall that for all the construction jobs posted in the United States alone, over 1 million of those posted open jobs will not even get a response. That is how big the gap is. So we've got currently 5 generations working in construction today, for people getting out of school or people coming out of high school, going into the trades, all the way to executives and leadership, running companies and people. Plus, we've got people in the industry now that are still working with the 40 years of experience in construction. And so 5 different generations from Gen Z to beyond the boomers to the traditional generation, all working together. Let me not leave out the millennials and the Gen X as well. And you've got 5 very unique styles, 5 different spans, 5 different comfort levels with technology, 5 radically different, depending on which one to which one, communication styles as well. So that's some of the things that are facing people. And then still coming out of the pandemic across the world, we have the world global supply chain. Eric, we've got issues with procurement. We're starting to also see some procurement improve, but even now for basic switchgear, lead times can be in excess of a year. So for a lot of people, and even some of the commodities, we're seeing wood was big during the summer and the early fall where you could not get lumber to support your projects. And there were lead times and stories, and people are remembering and probably are traumatized a little bit. I'm with you. I lived that trauma with you where it was hard to get wood or even do things around your house. Even residential was impacted pretty hard by the supply chain issues. So that's the state that we're in coming out of this. So not enough people. And we have way longer than what we've been used to, lead times for materials, even some commodity goods.
Okay, there's 3 things there. And first one is the labor shortage. Second one is the 5 generations in the workplace and their unique styles, particularly as it relates to technology, and then the global supply chain. We're recording this late 2022, so we're looking at 2023. Please give me something new on how we're going to deal with the labor shortage, because we've been talking about it and I don't see it ever changing, right? There's both the amount of labor available and the skill of the labor that is available. So what am I supposed to do as a construction company owner to address that labor shortage? What can I do?
One of the things you can do is you can shift towards the easy thing, is to take advantage of the labor that you currently have. So don't force people to stick build, because stick building or assembling, constructing on site, receiving raw goods or raw materials on your sites, on your construction projects, and trying to put things together is going to tie up a lot of your labor. So take some of that key labor, move it offsite, either into your own facilities or a warehouse facility adjacent, or if you've got the space on your project, create an area on your site where you can pre-assemble things in a controlled environment, focused on prioritizing for flow. And some other companies are more sophisticated in this, Eric, and they've even gone so far as to create a design for manufacture strategy and implementation where they're shifting a lot of labor offsite into different facilities, into controlled factory-like environments that are well air-conditioned or heated, depending on where you are in the world, great lighting, much better facilities, and they're then shifting pre-assembled kit of parts we call prefabrication or kitting. And that is a great strategy where you can dramatically reduce on-site labor hours. You're still utilizing the craft, the genius of the people that put the things together for us, but you're creating an environment where hours can be shifted offsite, and then those materials can be assembled on your site much faster. And we've got some examples of companies that have taken this approach and invested in this. The Bolt company where I work today is one such great example where we've created a modular team. We've got a group of professionals that their full-time job is to implement these strategies on projects across the entire organization.
Yeah, let me just ask you about that, because I think that's the toughest challenge, is that I know there's things I should do and I understand the logic of that, and yet it's the allocation of resources to that. So internally there at Bolt, how do you go through that process of, number one, determining where internal allocation resources need to be allocated that aren't necessarily directly project related immediate in the short term? And then how do you go about putting together those teams and disciplining yourself to focus on those things that, again, aren't necessarily building something on a job site today?
That's exactly like you said. Like, we've experiencing this at our company for a long time. We've got an aging workforce, and we looked at the future and said, we're not going to have enough people because there's just not a pipeline like there used to be. So the countermeasure to that was to create this modular team. So we created a couple key positions. And right now it's head up by Mel Taylor's helping with our self-perform, and Klaus is helping with our modular leadership. So a couple key people, some self-perform and purposely modular, working hand in glove together to make it available to all project teams where this is the need at the beginning. So like, this is something we talk about in the pursuit phase. What's going to be our strategy for design for manufacture, kitting, prefabrication, offsite assembly? And then we bring that as an option when we're pursuing work, through the planning of the work, and of course, through the execution of the work. So if you're listening out there, I want to give you like two options. I want to give you the easy button, and I'm going to give you the more future long-term. The easy button is that if you're on a job right now, all you have to do is talk to the trades working on your project and say, what capabilities do you have where we can do some kitting, some pre-manufacture or pre-assembly, and just ask them. And then that's something that you can implement on your project on Monday. Monday, you can have a conversation with your key trades and just say, what capabilities do you have? What can we add to this job so that we can implement some of that? And if you're an owner of a company, you're a leader on an existing company, and you don't have any type of modularization or dedicated resources, look at the labor market, look at your own forecasts for 2023 and say, how can I continue to serve my clients, deliver projects reliably, but still segregate? You can start with making it some portion of some leader's time, or you can make a hire and bring somebody that's got the experience to implement this at your organization. That's a little more of a resource commitment. So at the Bolt company, they made that commitment a long time ago, way before I got here, Eric. And I'm seeing the benefits of that. There have been case studies published on our website. Go to bolt.com And you can click on that to read case studies and see examples of some of these stories, things that we were able to even deploy during the pandemic with major supply chain issues, still successfully create clinics. There's a great example of the StatMod project. I'll make sure to give you a link, Eric, so you can share that
That'd be great.
Directly with the listeners to want to read more of how that was done and how quickly you can pivot and be flexible.
Let me ask you this then, because obviously modular offsite construction, again, it's something that does work, but it's also something that has limits. What are the limits of offsite construction from your experience looking at the industry?
There's two big things to consider. One, if you're going to go to the most extreme example where you're creating like Lego interconnecting parts and pieces modules that you drop in, one of the things you have to consider is you're going to add a lot of structural steel to that project. So one of the limits is, can you afford to add that much steel? Because if you're going to create, like, let's say for example, you're making bathroom mods, and there's quite a few companies out there that make turnkey bathrooms that you can plug and play into your building, even if it's a traditional stick-built construction. You've got additional steel and reinforcing for those types of things. And you also need to consider inspections. Depending on where you are in the country, you might have to have some additional inspection expenses that you should pass on to your owners, because the owner should be paying for this as part of the project costs, where you're going to have inspectors go off to an offsite facility and do some inspections for things that they won't be able to see other than in the warehouse or the factory, if you will, where they're putting it together. So steel, additional weights, additional cost on steel beyond what's normal because of how these things come in, because they have to stand alone to be able to go down the highway on the road to get connected in. The other constraint that you're going to have is engineering and design. In order to allow for some of this to happen, if you're on a hard bid project, you've already received completed drawings. So you cannot change unless through the RFI or bulletin process, whatever your contract allows. There's certain things that you cannot change, not easily. I mean, you could argue, Eric, that you could change anything. With the right change order, you can make it happen. But in practicality and reality, the engineer and the architect of record have already designed something that works and that's at least majority coordinated between the different design disciplines. And if you're going to introduce something modular to that already completed design, that's going to be a major design change. So that's a limitation. So a lot of the work that we do where we involve our modular team, we're involved way early, even oftentimes at conceptual design, in creating that strategy with the client and saying, what do you want to achieve? And then we have to show them, like, here's the benefits to the schedule so you can have your finished building faster. Because a lot of the things that can happen, even when you're still finishing your later design packages, if you have a modular strategy that you're implementing, you can start to release those components into construction while you're still doing earthwork and some of the early trades.
That's interesting then, because that speaks then to another limitation potentially of modular is the types of projects I'm building and the contracts associated with them, the way the contract is structured, the way the design is done. Do you think that 5, 10, 15 years from now, because of the advantages of the modular offsite construction and the impact on the project, the very structure of contracts and the way that construction is designed and bid is going to be changing? Or do you think it's always going to have that hard bid design upfront element to it?
No, I think we're already seeing in the industry now a shift towards more design build. There are some statistics shared by the Design Build Institute of America that I'm going to totally not get correct, so I'm not going to put a number out there. But I know that the numbers that they shared at the last conference that we had, that I attended physically in Napa some years ago, is they showed exponential increase in design build projects as a proportion of total projects let per year in the United States, and specifically west of the Rocky Mountains. So all the states west of the Rocky Mountains saw an exponential increase. So this would be double digit is exponential. So greater than 10% increase. I think it was more than 25% from memory. But again, we were in Napa, Eric, so you got to forgive me because wine was passed out at many different breaks.
In Napa?
Yes, in Napa. And so I want to say it was somewhere north of there. And then we're seeing on the East Coast as well, an increase in design build projects. And a lot of the industrial projects have been this way for a long time. The EPC, engineering, procurement, construction, industrial work has been this type of delivery model for a long time. We're seeing a reduction in the typical design, bid, build, hard bid, like you said. And so in those environments where the general contractor is now responsible, there's an incentive there to do more of this modularization because it does improve the total construction time, which is a great lever to pull on to be more profitable and to have an easier delivery as well. that's going to just continue to increase.
How much of the work that Bolt does is self-performed? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. And I don't have that statistic handy. And this is like 2 days in a row I've been asked the same question. We self-perform about a dozen different trades, from engineers, millwrights, masonry, concrete, rigging. And people at Bolt listening, if I left any out, you have to forgive me. Again, we'll give you a link to the website because this is all on our site: concrete, masonry, structural steel, operators, millwrights. So I think it's right around plus or minus 12 different trades that we self-perform. It's quite a bit depending on the geography. And then we travel across the entire United States, including Alaska and Hawaii, to do projects as well.
The reason I'm curious, I didn't hear MEP trades in there. Did I hear that correctly?
To the best of my knowledge, not at scale. We have a lot of good, really good MEP partners that we work with and we travel with across that actually will go with us across the country.
Have you found that those folks are the ones who initiate a lot of the offsite discussions, because those are the types of trades that lend themselves the most to the offsite modular approaches? Am I correct there? Or
yeah, so for all the people listening that aren't super key onto the acronyms that Eric and I are dropping down, I'll just say them out loud. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, and framing trades. Those trades, MEPF, which we just shortened to MEP.
Hey, you just threw in the F there, man. Come on.
Yeah, I threw the F. It's the first F of the show. It's always going to be some. So no apologies for that. Those types of trades, a lot of the companies, especially the larger ones that we work with, Eric, they all have some capability, and some of them way more advanced than others. And even my experience, I've been in construction for over 25 years. I find that even small plumbing, I worked one time with a very small plumbing contractor, and they utilized this prefabrication and kitting on a project that was just under 100,000 square feet, 2-year-long duration. And because they kitted and prefab, they were able to keep a 4 to 6 person plumbing crew on that project and never miss a date because of that approach. And this is from starting with the model and taking that model information, taking it all the way to things that they spool up and make in their site. And it was like to the almost bewilderment of the on-site supervision at times, like how small their crew could be. But the crew was consistent. It was the same people every time. The quality was much, much higher. A lot of times you see on crews that don't do this, the contrast is when you're assembling everything on the site, you can have a lot of variation and fluctuations in labor. Like you might have 10 plumbers this week, 25 plumbers the following week, and then 3 plumbers another week, and then some weeks no plumbers. And just to pick on plumbers for a second, but this is true of all the different trades that we mentioned. So I think having that, utilizing prefabrication, kitting is like the easiest thing to do. I think most MEPF people listening all say, like, to some degree, they already use this to be competitive. You have to be competitive because there's the lack of labor, like Eric and I talked about. So this is a good countermeasure for people to overcome that labor issue, just not having enough.
What about when it comes to offsite, just construction and the modular construction? What about the limitations of access? How do those create a constraint on effectively using modular and offsite? So I'm trying to access the site, but because of the nature of the site and the unique geography of a particular project, that limits me.
Right. So if you're working in a space, let's say it has like 0 lot lines, which means like you're building butts against buildings on 2 sides, 3 sides, or you've got a roadway. Like Eric's right, you're going to have limitations of where can you set cranes, because plugging in modular construction usually requires a lot of cranes, heavier cranes, bigger cranes. And sometimes that could be a limitation. And if we have that input going in the early phases, setting up the site logistics, those things actually are considered. And we drop in crane pick maps and weights and try to understand, like, are we going to get bang for our buck? Is there going to be a return on investment for going to this level of modular, given the site constraints? Because sometimes it doesn't pay back. And so we do all that in the early phases with sometimes even sketches and some standard crane charts that we have. And we can determine whether it has a payback or not. And then either scale back the modular or upsize the crane if it's going to give us good schedule performance, because that can turn into major savings for the client as well.
Excellent. Let's pivot a little bit to the supply chain. So we've heard the story repeated again and again. COVID obviously devastated the supply chain in many cases. We're recording this at the end of 22, so this will be going live in the first quarter of 23. What's your perspective on the supply chain for the next 12 to 18 months? Where are we going to be? What's it going to look like? What do contractors need to do to prepare for that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is don't guess. Talk to your suppliers, talk to your vendors, talk to your preferred contractors, and just ask them to be transparent with what's going on, and you'll get really good answers. There's strategies that you can implement, but I think optimistic, Eric, we're seeing numbers and durations decrease, even for things like roofing. And we forgot to mention roofing was one of the major things that recently became really challenged in the supply chain. But we're seeing durations coming back down to what's like the new normal, not quite what it used to be in 2017, 18, and the early 2010s that we were used to. But the things are starting to come back and we're seeing like improvement through the different ports. Again, it's a global supply chain. So everything is coming from somewhere. A lot of components still come from across the ocean, depending on what part of the country you're in. And so all that has to be considered. I think the best advice is to temper my optimism, Eric, because I'm very optimistic, especially I'm in a lot of schedule meetings with a lot of different project teams. And in general, I'm seeing improvements in those supply chain things. If you're on a project now and you're not talking to your vendors and your trade partners, you're going to err on the side of probably being too conservative or too optimistic. You're just going to be wrong. And I'd say take that schedule information that you're getting. And if you're getting a range of like 12 to 18 weeks on something, plug that into your forecasts and just plan for it. So at the Bolt Company, Eric, we utilize a system called the Bolt Production System, which is built on Last Planner System production controls, but it allows us a very standard way to look far into the future and make reliable promises in the short term. And so using that system for us allows us to take into account these long-term issues with procurement and then bring it into what are we going to make? It just makes it easier to manage on the daily, reliable promising once we get to the putting work in place.
With that in mind, then, what can a company do who, let's say I'm not the Bolt company, so I don't have these particular processes in place right away. What can I do to begin to build those processes so that I can be more accurate in my forecasting?
Yeah, the first thing you want to do is don't assume that everyone can read your schedule. Number one. Let's elaborate on that, Eric. The schedule is something that you use as a tool to have the right conversations and dialogue with your team. Like every single project, Eric, without exception, has at least 2 dates. Has a start date when you're going to start construction and an end date where you're going to substantially turn it over or the owner takes beneficial occupancy of the site. So 2 dates minimum. When do I start? When do I end? How you get there, all the in-between is the exciting part. And this is where a lot of companies have a low-hanging fruit right now. You can improve that by socializing that thing. So talk about it. Don't just hand it to people. If you're just emailing schedules or you're just putting them and giving it to people, you're missing out on having the dialogue. So the first step is talk about the activities in meaningful ways with the people. Don't lecture people. Ask people like, what does this mean to you? This milestone we're trying to achieve now includes X, Y, Z and does not include ABC, right? So it's both saying what's in and what's out. That's the very first step that anybody listening can do this. The other thing, step 2, is make it visual. Put it on display. Let's say you have a 65-page schedule and you're on a 2.5-year project. That's not something you just paste up as wallpaper in your office. Take some of the main work breakdown structure activities that roll down into some milestone type of activities or for my scheduling professionals out there, hammocks, and just show those as a simple bar chart. Put some milestones up in your conference room with some key dates, or show some hammocks or bar charts when you collapse your schedule to a more summary level and just gut check it. When you're in meetings with your teams, like talk through the sequence. If you're not to the level where you're pull planning yet or using Last Planner System or other agile type of methods like Scrum, then just make it visual and then communicate with people. Use it as an excuse to have a conversation about what's in and what's out.
Don't you love the fact that we don't have sponsorships on the Construction Genius podcast? And that's why I have no problem taking a quick break in the middle of the interview today with Felipe to remind you about my book, Construction Genius. This is a great book for construction companies who want to improve their leadership, their strategy, their sales, and their marketing. This is what you should do. Go out to Amazon, purchase a copy of Construction Genius for you and your leadership team. Then have each of the leaders in your organization read 1 chapter a month and meet for 1 hour once a month to discuss the chapter and talk about how you can use and apply the information in your construction company today. Each book, you can get the soft cover here I have in my hands if you're watching on video, paperback for $20. So let's say you have 7 guys in your leadership team. 7 times 20 is $140. You invest that $140 into your leadership team. You're going to get a tremendous return on investment as you read it, use it, and apply it in your business. So go out, grab yourself a copy of Construction Genius. And now back to our conversation with Felipe. Excellent. You mentioned something earlier, your optimism. I want to ask you, so I'm naturally a pessimist. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I found in working in construction that many of the people who are in the business are pessimistic as well by nature because they have to be, or at least they feel they have to be in order to mitigate the risks and manage the risk. So how do you, as an optimist, maintain your credibility when you're in a room full of pessimists?
You hit on something. I think you're right. That trend. I think, ladies and gentlemen, let it go on the record right now. Construction genius. Eric nailed it. Construction is full of pessimistic people because it takes one or two bad experiences that repeats multiple times that creates a pattern, and people will assume, rightfully so, that bad things are likely to happen based on experience. The reason I stay optimistic, Eric, is because I know that using different types of lean tools and tactics, you can take the pessimistic worst case scenario type of thinking and create countermeasures to mitigate those risks. Almost every risk, I can't say every, but I'm saying almost every risk can be mitigated and planned for on your team. And yes, there will be some variation. There'll be some events like a global pandemic that you could not have forecasted what was going to happen. What do they call it? Force majeure type of things, to use contract language. There could be some force majeure events, of course, but for the most part, the people on your team, they know from experience, like what are things that typically happen. And so planning with pessimists makes for really reliable plans because you could get good countermeasures. And so I always like to ask people, based on your experience, where will this plan fail? And then we can take little pieces of that plan and create mitigation measures. And we can just make some decision points and say, if we see this happen, like if we see, let's say, for example, that structural steel wide flange members start to become scarce or something, or we see like a change and there's a lot of data centers being built right now across the country, but that's going to start to come to an end as the different companies that are pulling those levers start to get to their saturation of where they're going to be. So we know there's going to be a dip in demand for some of these commodity items. And we can ask people like, where do you think we are in this? And just let people with experiences saying, well, the last job I did was this, or the last 3 jobs I've seen this, or we have 5 projects doing this, and this is what we did. And you take that information, you can change your plan. So the way that I build credibility with teams is that we change the plan live based on their input. And it goes from being our plan as the general contractor to becoming our plan for the project, with all people contributing. And I think that makes a really big difference. And when you shift from your plan to our plan, you start to implement some of that project first thinking, and then everyone starts to really put their hands around it. I see increased accountability. This I can say. I've never had an issue with personal accountability on project teams because we're always making moves to shift to the our plan, collaborative scheduling, collaborative planning, using some of these lean construction methods and tools. And that gets us to have these different types of outcomes, radically different. And it has to do with our philosophy. And so I stay optimistic, surrounded by pessimists. And I love the pessimists. You know what I do love, Eric? I love people that say that lean doesn't work on this type of job. I hear that all the time. Even now where I work, sometimes people say, well, we tried this lean thing and it didn't work. And then I'll ask them to tell me more. And they'll describe some process and I'll say, oh, when that thing happened, what did you guys do to experiment on that? And they're like, well, we just kind of like jumped over it, or they'll have some reason as to why it didn't work. And I said, okay, now that we know that, could we try something different instead? Like, let's use your experience and build on it. And if they're still really resistant, Eric, my next go-to thing is to, what can we subtract? Like, what are you doing now to mitigate for something that might not actually be a risk on this job? What's some work we can take off your shoulders, not do, create capacity to try something else? So that way we're not piling on, because people in construction, the people that are working, thank you everybody for your service working in our industry to build the world that we live in. Thank you for that. And I want to be someone that contributes to making that work easier and better. I don't want to be somebody that adds more work to your already heavy plate. Those are some of the ways that I use my optimism, my enthusiasm to reduce burden for people, use the genius of each individual on the team to make it shift from I to we.
I think that's interesting, though, because I do run across occasionally optimistic people in construction.
And there's one.
I know, right. I know maybe 3. But what's interesting, what I like about what you were saying there, Felipe, is that you're not just going in and saying, come on, guys, we can do this. You're actually going in with, okay, I acknowledge your pessimism and the value of it. Now let's talk about how we cannot be constrained by the pessimism in a negative way, but then use it to focus on how we can build a project as profitably and effectively as possible.
That's right. And I want everyone to be profitable. And I tell people, like, let's do things that pull the lever to improve your profitability. And at the same time, if I'm going into a job that's already had some challenges, I'll come in and say, let's pull some levers to reduce the frustration and stress on this project. Because what we do is already complex enough. We don't need to add to it and make it harder on ourselves. So sometimes we can do little things to reduce that stress and frustration. Like one example, we had a job, Eric, that was a schedule challenged, and the team had been together for over 2 years. We've walked the site because it's like from a conference room, you're going to know almost nothing. You got to go out there and walk the site. We walked the site, we realized the way to access the building was difficult. And so I asked our team, like, as a gesture of goodwill, can we improve site access to the building by creating a path, even if we pour some temporary concrete so people can walk in? They said, well, we didn't think about that. Like, we didn't realize how hard it was to get in and out. We'd just been used to it because we've been living it for 2 years. And so they made that move, and that brought a tremendous amount of goodwill. We saw productivity on that site increase for every single trade because we made access to the site easier. People could walk on a paved path versus what they had, the conditions they had before, which was non-ideal.
It's very interesting. Okay, so we talked about supply chain. We've talked about the labor issues. I'd like to pivot and talk about the generational diversity that we have. So like you said, 5 generations in the workforce. Let me posit something to you and you can push back on it. So my perspective on generational differences is that it's something that consultants like to emphasize in order to make a buck. And what I mean by that is back in the day, it was your millennial consultant, and now it's your Gen Z consultant. And as a consultant, I get it. But I have this phrase that always comes into my mind, and it's this: ballers ball. And what that means is, I don't care who you are, where you come from, the color of your skin, your gender, your political persuasion, whatever it is, ballers ball. And I'm always looking for ballers in my organization to build my projects. Are there ballers in every generation?
Absolutely. And every generation, you have people that identify with the others, and they'll say, like, don't label me. I hear that all the time, too. People say, don't label me. And I'll say, okay, but you grew up, your cohort of people that you grew up with, your culture is used to certain things that the other generations were not used to and still not used to. Right. So one of the key things that I want to share, and this is all public information that you can spend like 3 minutes on your favorite search engine and get some of this, but communication preferences. So here, let me just paint you the most dramatic contrast. The traditional generation, so these are people that are within 10 years of retirement. You can tell those individuals one time what the goals are for your organization, and you never have to tell them again. They will work towards that goal that you set up, like your company's mission, a project's vision. One time is all you have to tell them, once. And they don't even need to know why. Sometimes don't even care. You just said, like, this is the result we're trying to go to, and they'll drive to that result. Now, to contrast to Gen Z, these are people entering the workforce now, or who just entered the workforce within the last 5 years, or even up to 10 years. Even some of the later millennials fall into this as well. You have to tell them what the result you're driving towards is multiple times a day. If you don't tell them multiple times a day, they don't think it's important. It seems to be less important, and they don't trust it, don't believe it, and don't drive towards it. So there's one major contrast. That I'm not a psychologist. That I can't answer, Eric. But I've even asked the younger people, like, what's your biggest complaint? What's one thing you'd want to change working on this project? It's always an answer around not enough communication.
It's the crack pipe. Okay.
So he's showing. So for those listening, Eric has just held up his smartphone.
Because what it's done is it's rewired our brains. Like for my generation, it's rewired my brain as one of my Gen X, right? So I wasn't born with the internet, but I am now locked in. Whereas your Gen Zers, 2 generations removed from me, they've had this locked into their heads from the very beginning. And the nature of the way this communicates information to us, through the scrolling, through the clicking, just the rapid dissemination, lends itself then to the need for me to communicate multiple times and perhaps in multiple ways with younger generations in order for a message to be locked in. And that's because they've been brought up with this, which communicates information multiple ways with multiple messages. What do you think about that?
I think that's a really good hypothesis, Eric. And there's a lot of science behind attention. And I've heard a lot of consultants, especially lately. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of books on this, on attention and focus. There's already been some best-selling books on focus that's come out there because there are so many distractions. And it is hard to lock people in and to keep them focused. That's one of the things that we use these lean construction techniques that some of the older generations have complained. Like, why do we need to come together and talk about conditions of satisfaction? Like, doesn't everybody just know what we need to do here? And like the newer people don't have that information. They don't have the 25 years or 40 years of experience to know like what are the drivers.
So let me give you another pushback then. So let's say I'll buy into what you're saying, that someone Gen Z needs to hear a message multiple times a day in order to believe it. I'm a boomer, I'm a Gen Xer, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to keep looking for the people who are not like that. Right? So am I looking for unicorns, or are there people out there who, though they're Gen Z, they're just old school anyway, and they're going to be able to hear the message once and receive it and act on it?
I think a lot of things we see in natural systems will tend to follow a normal distribution curve or a Gaussian curve or a bell curve. So you're going to find your unicorns, but if you just look at your bell curve, that's going to be less than 5% of the total population, less than 5%. And we just talked about earlier in the show, of all the jobs posted in 2022, more than 1 million jobs never even got a response, because that's how big the labor gap is for the demand for craft, skilled, and professional labor, and the availability of people that are graduating, going into our fields and entering the construction industry. So I'm going to tell you something, Eric. All the unicorns are already working for somebody. They're already working. So unless you have a strategy to poach these unicorns, how will you even know? Because if they're working for somebody, they're doing a great job, you're not even going to know that they exist when you're searching.
So then let's talk a little bit more then. In your experience, what are some of the most effective strategies for the integration of the various generations in a construction company?
My favorite thing is the lean principle that we use called making things visual. We borrow this from the Toyota production system, just so I can cite my sources here. It's principle number 7, published in the Toyota way. Make work visible so no problems are hidden. That's the actual phrase. Make work visible so no problems are hidden. And we found that this speaks across all 5 generations. When you can take some aspects of your project and make it visual, that gives people something that they can point to and talk to and look at together. The feedback I've heard from teams, and a lot of our teams are mixed. Like we've got people, like I said, that are going to retire within 5 years or less. And we've got people that just came from school or they just joined the craft as apprentices, and this is their first project. And when you make things visual, everybody can stand shoulder to shoulder, look at something in front of them and talk to it. They can point to it. It's a much better communication thing for people. The richness, the saturation is so much higher versus just the words or an occasional email or some of the other strategies that companies do or don't use. And most communication, people will say, like, even if they were skeptical beforehand, once they do it, the feedback I've heard from all across the 5, we have some project teams that have all 5 generations working on the same project. The feedback has been like, this is making everything so much easier and better for us. There's been a lot of thank yous, and even the people that said this is common sense. And for anyone listening, and you're listening to the show or watching the show, and you're like, well, this is common sense, I want you to think about the projects that you're involved in and just try to find it. And it's not going to be common. It's not as common as you think. You need to have an intention and then action with that intention to make it real.
So how do I create boundaries when it comes to integrating generations from the perspective of, okay, so I want to adapt myself to, let's say, the younger generations and this whole topic that we discussed around how they receive information. But what are the lines where I say, yes, I'm going to adapt myself, but at this point, this is where I'm going to stop with that adaptation. And if you don't perform up to my expectations, then there isn't a place for you in this company. How do you draw those lines, describe those lines?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is negotiation. Come at it like a negotiator. Don't come at it like a dictator. And yes, people, even if you're working in a company, you're like, but I run this company. Yeah, you run the company, you own the company, you control the company's destiny. But guess what? You're in the same labor market that the rest of us are in. So I think as a starting point, you should say, these are my expectations. So if you're the owner of the company and you're used to just telling people what to do, realize that you're a major constraint in the ability for your company to grow, thrive, and adapt. So instead, you can take the position of like, these are my minimum standards, like work hours. This is something that's very contentious among the generations, like especially in construction where there's an expectation unwritten that you should work more than 10 hours a day. And it doesn't matter if it's design or project work in the field. Everyone across the industry has this expectation. The other landmine we can jump on is hybrid work or remote work. But we won't jump on that landmine just yet. So I'd say if you're the leader of the company, tell people, I don't mean like have it written down in some policy buried in a file cabinet. I mean, tell the person and show them this is what our expectation is at this organization. And then ask, what do you understand this means to you? And then listen to what they say. And then say, now, based on this, where are some areas that you would consider it valuable if we were flexible? And then listen to what they say. And now by asking for them to repeat back what it means to them, and then asking where it would be more valuable to them, where you could be flexible, Now you can negotiate. You've already found the common ground because they're going to inevitably say things that are lined up with what your expectations are, your minimum expectations. So you've found common ground and now you can negotiate. And just know for you as the leader, like what's really important and where you can be flexible. It does not have to be black and white. It does not have to be yes or no. It does not have to be 100% my way and not their way at all. There can be some flexibility.
Okay, so it's very interesting because, again, I'm just going to push back and say, I need to negotiate with someone that I just hired about how they're supposed to perform. This is your job description, and I'm giving you money. So here you go, execute.
Right. So this is one of the other generational things that these consultants, Eric, they make a real good living telling you. So we see a trend in younger people will go work for a company that has more flexibility, even for less pay. And so we see the Gen Z will sacrifice pay and also for purpose. Gen Z, the new generation coming in, will take a pay cut compared, like let's say the pay for a certain position is $50,000 a year. They will come down tens of thousands of dollars for a position if the purpose speaks to what they want. They want to have a more meaningful impact for society, and they will take pay cuts to have that impact. So it's not money. Money is not a significant enough driver in of itself. There's definitely a minimum threshold, but once you meet that threshold, now you're competing, and it's these other things, these other intangibles. They're going to differentiate you to creating a place that's going to be a magnet for good labor and talent versus repulsing labor and talent. And then you're going to struggle. So if you're a company and you're struggling to get people to come work in your construction organization, talk to your recruiting people and see what kind of feedback you're getting from the candidates that pass. And it's also very common today in this market, Eric, for candidates to receive multiple offers. This is an employee's market right now, unless you work for Twitter.
Yeah, right. Okay, so landmines. You brought up a landmine. I want to dive on it. It's the hybrid work landmine, okay? So maybe I'm a software developer and I can see building a team with my guys here, there, and everywhere, and it's all good. But construction, is it feasible in construction to stick with that hybrid work environment or even the remote work environment? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, my thoughts are, I think it's position dependent and it's also construction phase dependent. I think for most teams, and no one's going to disagree with this, at some point during the early forming of a team, you've got to have at least one in-person gathering so that people can read each other, get a sense of what they're like. There's certain things that you're never going to experience virtually. And we heard this all throughout. There's thousands of stories about people that got hired and have been working for 2 years before they finally met in person. So I think in construction, because it's all built on trust, how we work and operate, and there's no shortcut to trust, but there's definitely things that prevent or slow trust building down. The sooner we can get together as people, at least one time together, to create that environment where we can build trust, then we can go hybrid after. It's easier to go hybrid if you have to. And I think that's very true in design, especially brand new teams coming together. It's so critical that initial session, that first kickoff meeting, or some of these early planning meetings happens face to face, shoulder to shoulder. Then after that, you can really flex and shift towards a hybrid. Now in the construction phase, there's certain things like the building does not assemble with robots. Human beings put the building together. Right now, for as far as the supervision for that, how that can happen, if you're on a management team, so let's say it's a 10-person project, do all 10 people have to physically be on site 5 days a week? No, they don't have to be. So I think depending on your phase, you can flex and have some hybrid work. We saw early in the pandemic when people that could work from home on active construction sites did, their productivity actually increased because they had decreased commute times. And so there's some major advantages to letting people have a hybrid environment. And if you hired the right people and you trust them and they trust you, they're not going to be messing around and not working and not being productive. But if you see, like, if you got hybrid people and they're missing deadlines, they're not showing up to meetings, that's a wholly different issue. Right now, there was a post, a superintendent, my buddy Andrew, put a post on LinkedIn, and he took the position that a construction superintendent on an active construction project site should 100% be able to work remote at key times. And his post had like, I don't know, I felt like, I'm not going to exaggerate, but it seemed like 10,000 people commented. And like the vast majority of comments that he was getting to that post were saying like, impossible, can't do it. No, he'd given some details and some context of how it was being done. So I think if a construction superintendent can sometimes be remote, and we at the Bull Company have some construction superintendents that are occasionally remote. So like, I'm not making this up. This is not like a made up story. This is something real. It can work, but it's got to work with some boundaries so they could be successful.
Okay, so I can understand the logic of a hybrid work environment for today's project, but help me with this part. There is an aspect of being in person, like you just said, that you can't replace. And I'm curious about the impact of hybrid work environments on the development of junior people. And so let me paint you a scenario here. So back in the day, when I say back in the day, I mean 2019. I'm a project manager in the office. A phone call comes in from the client. I pick up the phone call and I'm having the conversation. In the office next door is my project engineer who happens to be in the office at the same time and is listening to the way that I'm handling the issue with the client. I get off the phone, I go into the project engineer's office, and I break down my thought process with them about how I dealt with this issue. The project engineer then gets a valuable learning lesson. Okay, am I painting at least a reasonably possible scenario here?
I've had the same experience.
Okay, so from that point of view, it strikes me as being one of the issues with hybrid environments is that scenario is diminished quite a bit, the frequency of that scenario happening, and therefore the development of our junior people is being hindered by the hybrid work environment.
Absolutely true. I completely agree, Eric. I think if you're on a team that's hybrid and you don't have a strategy for how you're going to create that scenario where you can have a shared learning opportunity and you just do the work only, you are majorly short-circuiting the development of your team. Because you're going to get through that project. You might have accomplished everything the project needed. Your team coming off of that project will not have grown and have additional skills to move up. And one of the big frustrations of the younger people is they want to see a path to continuous learning and recognition for that learning, sometimes through promotions. But if you don't create that environment where they can have that exposure and you just do the work only, that's not enough to get promoted. So listen to me, people. If you're out there and you just do your job, that is not enough to get promoted. To get promoted and move up means that you're increasing your responsibilities and your capabilities. And if you're not in an environment where you're getting exposed to somebody with experience where you can have those learnings, then you're going to have a really hard time being able to move up and develop and grow. And you're going to get bored. If I'm an engineer now in a job and all I do is like change orders, like after a project or two, I've got mastery of that one thing. That doesn't mean that I can go supervise or lead work or create strategies to improve project delivery. If I'm just really good at change orders, that's really stifling my development and my capabilities. So the hybrid people listening, you have to bring people back together at key points. One of the things I've heard from some teams that do this is they've made mandatory as an easy start, like to give people some flexibility that really want this, but it's hard to do it. They'll say Fridays is the optional hybrid work from home day. And so people can plan for that. And some other teams will say like every Tuesday and Thursday, we will be on site together, right? So they set up rules. Those are two different rules for two different types of teams that you can set up and think about. So people like once you set something, like try it a couple times and then change it if it doesn't work. Don't do it for like 2 years straight. And if it sucked on the first or second week, like don't keep doing bad stuff, like change it.
Okay. So just in summary then, with this particular point, how can I create continuous learning opportunities in a hybrid work environment for my junior people so they're not getting stagnant and they are developing?
Yeah, you start with why it's important for us to be together as a team. And we often find if you just ask people like, in your experience, what builds trust? And listen to what people say, it's going to be human interaction. And say like, there's not, as good as these cameras are, as good as this microphone is, like being able to hear me like that scenario you described, that'd be a great story to share. I have so many stories where I heard a PM having a difficult conversation with the client that if I had not been in the trailer with them, I never would have heard it. Or being in a conference room where we're negotiating something or having to deliver bad news. If I had not physically been there, I never would have had that experience and I would not know how to do it. I'd be guessing and reinventing the wheel. So if you share why, start with sharing the why is this important for us, and then share what frequency do we think we want to create for this, for your improvement and development. And then say like, and then the follow on is like, and where can we flex to be adaptive for you so that it's a give and take. It's not one way. It's not one direction. And then also older people, what are some of the things that the younger generation knows, skills that they have that we don't have where they can teach us? We should have them teaching us as much as we're teaching them. It should be give and take.
What do you think are the skills that younger people do have that we as older folks need to learn?
I've seen like just on virtual design and construction or building information modeling, the ease and comfort of the people coming out of school now, because they're learning these skills in the classroom, even in the trades. I recently toured the Carpenters Union in Las Vegas in their training center, and they have courses where they're teaching the carpenters coming up for training, like how to navigate an augmented reality, virtual reality. And that's just something that's part of their everyday training. You and I didn't have that when we were coming up. So that's something we're going to either learn on the job or we're going to have to go take a separate course. But why not learn that from the people that already got that training? They can teach us and we can accelerate our learning and our development. And that's just one example of a technology thing. And there are other things that they're learning as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so we kicked off, we're talking about the labor shortage. We did the supply chain. We've talked about generational issues with the hybrid work environment landmine. As we're wrapping up here, what haven't we talked about that we need to talk about, particularly in light of construction in 2023?
Yeah, the one thing I want to showcase, like all the things we discussed, like, and the things we talked about, that's all been countermeasures. And I was like, I got to just plug my book, Eric, like Construction Scrum. This is the plug, like why, what we're trying to offer you. In 2023, if you cannot adapt and be agile, you're going to suffer unnecessarily. So people visit my link, thefelipe.bio.link. You can there's free resources. My book is available for free on Kindle Unlimited. So you can read the book. You can download the first section from that links that I've just provided to you. So you can read the cool sections on how to get started. Becoming agile and being agile, that's all experimenting and countermeasures to the high uncertainty and complexity in the environment. And these are things that you can start on your project at any phase, at any time. And I've got terabytes worth of resources for free. Also check out the ebscshow.com, like Construction Genius. The Easier, Better for Construction podcast is all about featuring the brilliant people in the construction industry to come on and share ideas and real stories of implementations and improvements to how projects are delivered so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Learn from others, stand on the shoulders of giants, iterate, be agile, be adaptive, experiment and learn and share the learning. That's how we're going to get better, right, Eric?
That's awesome. I really agree with that. And we're going to have links in the show notes to your book. I'm just pulled it up on Amazon here. It's got a really high rating there. So congratulations there.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll make sure to have those links in the show notes. So please click on those links and check out the resources. And Felipe's podcast definitely is well worth your time. So thank you for coming on the show again. I think we should make an annual event of getting you back on for 2024's forecast into construction. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for listening to my interview today with Felipe. I really enjoyed that. That was a fast hour, wasn't it? Feel free to contact Felipe through the various links in the show notes. Check out his book, Construction Scrum, and share the interview with other people that you think would benefit from the content and the information. Finally, I have a request. Can you please give the show a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts? What that does is it helps us to get seen on the internet in terms of spreading the show through the webs. I'm not quite sure how everything works there, but I know it does. So I'm looking at my page right now. We have 126 ratings and a 4.9 out of 5-star review. So if you can go to Apple Podcasts and give us a review, an honest rating, that would be tremendously helpful. I thank you for listening to Construction Genius.